Welcome to Chautauqua People. My guest today is Sylvia Faust. She's a long-term Chautauquan, having first come to the institution in 1967. She's lived in the same house on Ames for 49 years. She was First Lady of the institution while her husband served as Chairman of the Board of Trustees. She's been trained as a special education and elementary school teacher and has taught for a period of time. She participated in Chautauqua Institution's 100th anniversary in 1974. For many years she was an income tax specialist. Sylvia's been active participant in Habitat for Humanity and currently serves on several community boards. Sylvia, how did you first make your way to Chautauqua?
My husband came as a child. His father was a Presbyterian minister, and they came and stayed. I think it was at Ken's Court, in a trailer, and he liked it so much. And when we moved to Florida, and he became an attorney there, we were going to come north to visit my family and his family. And he said he didn't want to have to visit for 3 weeks every year, family. So he suggested we come to Chautauqua, and that's how I first got here.
So did you have any family around here, or your family was in?
Well, I'm from near Pittsburgh originally.
Okay.
But my mother came in when she was in college and worked as the cook for a family on Lake Chautauqua, just down from the lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
And her best friend was the nanny that year. And she had a wonderful time going to Chautauqua on Sundays when it was free.
Now, you have this very substantial investment in Chautauqua time. What was family life like during the early years at Chautauqua for you guys, particularly housing?
Well, the housing for the first 7 years that we were here, we stayed at the Gleason in one room, four of us, and we had access to the porch. And we came for 1 week, then we came for 2 weeks, and then we came for 3 weeks, and finally decided that we would, we didn't decide to purchase a house. One day I went to the knit shop, and my husband was going somewhere else, and he came after we met back up again. He said, well, I've looked at 3 houses that we might buy. And I said, oh, because I didn't have any idea we were going to buy a house. And we bought the cheapest house for sale at Chautauqua in 1974.
Wonderful. Is that where you are now?
That's where we are now.
And so that worked out wonderfully, didn't it?
It did.
And now you've made the decision subsequently to live here full time, just being your primary residence.
Correct.
How did you make that decision?
Well, for all those Florida people listening, I'm sorry to say I did not enjoy living in Florida for 40 years. I don't like hot weather, and decided after my husband's death that I would come here and live here full time. And that's 20 years ago, so I've lived here for 20 years.
And so there's no question about that.
Right.
Now, I understand your husband was chairman of the Board of Trustees during a very important period in Chautauqua history when we had some substantial interactions with the Soviets.
Right.
And we had a visit from the Soviet delegation. What was that like?
That was an exciting time. That was in 1986. David and I went to the airport to meet the bus, to meet the people coming. We weren't sure how we were going to know who they were as they got off the plane, because they didn't have a special plane. There were 300 of them, but they knew who we were. So I rode back in I think we had 3 buses, and my husband rode back with some of the higher ups, but I was on one of the buses. As we came up 394 from the thruway, we came to the Chautauqua, and of course they wondered about, at that time we had things on top of the fence to keep people from climbing over. They thought we were keeping people in. I said, no, we are keeping people out that don't have tickets. I don't think they believed me, but anyway, and we were so excited. I was excited, and so were they, when we went down Miller Avenue, and there were probably, I don't know how many thousands of people in Vester Plaza, because they had no idea how they would be accepted. This was still times of the Soviet Union, and they were crying by the time we got down the hill into the Vester Plaza. We had worked on where they were going to stay, and the ones that were higher ups of the Communist Party wanted to be sure they were staying at the hotel, because they thought that was the best place to stay. Well, as it turned out, they really wanted, after hearing the stories of the people that stayed in people's houses, they learned that was even a better place to stay. We really enjoyed that. And the people that were hosts and hostesses for the delegation were very happy. We had 2 lawyers stay with us, plus someone that was an interpreter, so we could talk to them. Now, the St. Elmo at the time was being built, and we had just remodeled our house. So our guests wanted to know how much the government had paid us to remodel our house so that they could stay there, and how much the government was paying to rebuild the St. Elmo Hotel. Well, we tried to tell them that there wasn't any government money, but again, that's not what they were used to. So it was an exciting time.
Were they good house guests?
They were very good house guests, yes. One of them was on the phone a bit. It must have been a labor type lawyer, because he was talking to some labor groups around the United States. I think they went to Pittsburgh. Some of them went to Pittsburgh for a couple days after they were here.
Did they have any special interests about your family or the house that stuck with you?
They had special interests about Walmart. They wanted to go shopping, and they wanted denim. That was the one thing that they wished to buy. About our family, my children were younger at the time, and they were very nice to the children, but of course we couldn't correspond very much since we knew no Russian, and the 2 particular men knew no English, which wasn't unusual for that delegation.
Now, subsequently, you traveled to the Soviet Union.
Yes, I did twice. I did it in 1987 and then in 88.
Can you tell me a little more about that?
Well, my husband had passed away early in 88, and so I had asked my daughter, who was a freshman in college, if she would like to go. And she did. And a number of young people went with us that time. And we went to Georgia. And they had a grand time. And it was really, we enjoyed staying in the houses of the people that we were living, that were our hosts. One night we went up to their dacha, which was up in the mountains. Well, there was lots of drinking and celebrating. We weren't quite sure we were going to get down the mountain safely, but we did. It was a fun time. The first trip was to Latvia, and then we went on to the conference was in Latvia, and then we went on to Moscow. And David and I had gone on a tour of the subways. The Moscow subways are very elegant, some of them. But Danilov, the journalist, had been arrested, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And he was in jail when we first got to Washington before we left on the trip. And President didn't think that we should go because he was in jail. Well, we stayed in Washington for 2 days waiting to see what was going to happen. And Danilov was then put under house arrest, so he wasn't in jail anymore. So anyway, when we were in Moscow, David was to go see him with a group of our people. But we had gone on this subway tour, and so we realized we weren't going to get back in time for him to go unless we came on the subway ourselves. So we asked how we got back to where we were, and she told us, I think it was 3 stops that we should get off. Well, when we got off, we didn't recognize anything around us. And I said to David, how are we going to find our hotel? We couldn't read the signs. And this soldier was coming towards us, and David asked him about the hotel, and he couldn't understand what we were saying. And then David said the Kremlin, because we were very close to the Kremlin. And the soldier said, oh, and then he showed us how to get to the Kremlin.
So that's how you made your way.
That's how we made our way. The conference in Latvia was very, very interesting. It was like a Chautauqua lectures and things, and the people were very, very pleasant to us. We really had a great time doing that.
How did the Latvians share their sentiment about being part of the Soviet Union?
Not too much. they had to be careful about what they said. And I sent a book that had been a CLSC book to the young lady that we'd become sort of friendly with. And I'd sent her the book Blue Highways, which I thought sort of showed what the United States was like. It was written by William Least Heat Moon, and it was one of the CLSC books that year. But I thought that was a good, a better view of the United States than watching some of our movies that they might have watched.
Yeah.
So
how long did you keep in touch with those people?
not too long, several years, but it
It
fades away.
and
Yes.
things go in different directions.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have any desire to go back?
It would be interesting to go back to see how it is now. Yeah, I do like to travel, so if I
Yeah.
get the opportunity, I would go back.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit. And you've been involved in Habitat for Humanity. Can
Yeah.
you tell me about that?
I got involved with Habitat for Humanity when Millard Fuller came to speak at the Hall of Philosophy. I think it was 1988 or 89. And I was here in the summer, and then I was in West Palm Beach in the wintertime. So I wanted some kind of a volunteer job I could do both places. And I was impressed with what he had to say about Habitat. So I signed up to work in West Palm Beach, but then I did it here too. Later on, we didn't have Habitat right at the beginning, but we now have a Chautauqua area Habitat for Humanity, and I serve on the board, and it takes in all of Chautauqua County. Right now, we're building a house or finishing a house in Jamestown, not building it, it's a rehab, and then we're building one in Silver Creek. Over the years, we've probably done, 32 or 33 houses. It's slow going, but it does make a big difference to the people that get those houses. And of course, they have to work on them too. Some people think that Habitat just gives the people the house. That's not true. They have to work on either rebuilding or building the house with the volunteers. One thing exciting about Habitat is I decided I would do some traveling with the Habitat group. And so the first one I went to was Papua New Guinea. Now, not many people at that time, it was in 1989, and not people knew where Papua New Guinea was, except the men that had served during World War II and had fought the battles in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
So we got there, we got to Port Moresby, and then we got on a truck that was one of those that looked like a army truck, no top on it, but and we went up the mountain, and it was getting dark, and we knew that beyond where we were going, there were still cannibals.
Whoa.
And I don't know that there are any more cannibals now, but there were. This was in the late 80s. And so we get up to the top of the mountain where we were going to be building. It got dark, and as we drove into the village, there was a huge bonfire, and they were all dressed up in their the paints and things and doing dances. And for a while, we thought maybe we were dinner, but it turned out we weren't dinner. And we worked in 3 different villages there. Another funny story about Papua New Guinea, we had gone into the jungle to get the trees out. They had a sawmill that cut down the trees, and then we went in the jungle. And the children followed us and were helping us. And so we started singing 99 bottles of beer on the wall. Well, that was not a good idea, because after about 4 verses, the children started singing it in English. And so we thought we better switch this song. So we switched it to Farmer in the Dale, which was a much better idea. Each of the Habitat trips that I took abroad, we went somewhere else at the end of our working. We usually worked 2 weeks, and then we went somewhere for some pleasure. And in Papua New Guinea, we went to Lae, which is down right near the ocean, and we spent a week there. Then my next trip was to South Africa, Durban, South Africa, and this was about 5 years maybe after the apartheid was finished there.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to live in the the parts where we were building because they were afraid for our safety,
Yeah.
although we had no problem. But the townships. So we stayed in a missionary house in Durban and then every day went out to work. The thing that people there were so excited about was up until the year before we were there, they had always had to go to the well to get their water. And the well was quite a ways away, I mean miles, several miles away. And they had gotten pumped water into the village. They had them, the water pipes were above the ground, and they each had a lock on them so that the neighbor couldn't use your water. You know, they had to use their own water. But that was so exciting for them because they had spent so much time fetching water. You know, you don't think about that.
Yeah.
And at the end of that trip, we went to on a safari to one of the animal safaris on that one. Then my third trip was to Budapest, Hungary, and there we stayed on a boatle. It was a boat on the Danube that was a hotel, and so they called it a boatle. And that's the first time and the only time that we worked on housing that was connected. There were 5 houses that in a line, and the first floor of those houses were stores, small stores, so that the people could have a business, and then the upper floor was where they lived. So that worked out very, very, very well. We worked on doing they called it landscaping, but it was really pulling out weeds and things too.
Right.
And I'll just tell you about the other 2 trips too,
By all
because
means.
they were different. The fourth one was to Nepal, Pokhara, Nepal, and we were doing 3 different houses. They divided us up into 3 different houses in Pokhara, and it's near the Annapurnas, the mountains, which are gorgeous. In fact, they call that Pokhara the gateway to the Annapurnas. And we were staying in a church on the floor, but every day we had to walk to our house. Well, I don't know why this cow got interested in following me. And it was a big cow. I mean, I was not real happy. And of course, the cows roam free there in Pokhara. So I always had to everybody else went one street where the cow was, and I had to go the other street because that cow would not leave me alone. So I don't know what that cow thought about me, but anyway. So we finished that work, and then we went to Lhasa in Tibet. We flew to Lhasa, and then we came back over the pass at Everest, which is at 20,000 feet. Walking across that pass, you walked very slowly. There was not much air up there. And I can't imagine, Everest I think is 29,000 feet, so I can't imagine the other
So
9.
you were walking at 20,000 feet?
20,000 feet, very, very slowly across. And then my last trip abroad with Habitat was to Jordan, and we worked there. It was a little town, and I can't remember the name of it, by the Dead Sea, and that was where we were putting on a concrete roof. All the others we'd put on wooden roofs. This one was a concrete roof, and they also built the houses so the rebar went up to a second floor. We didn't finish the second floor, but the people, as they could afford it, could have put a second floor on their house. So anyway, we were building the roof of the first floor, and we had a walkabout cement mixer, and so they were mixing the cement, and so we made a line, and and with the buckets of cement, and, you went up the ramp and poured it on. It took us all day. But my job was to run between the line and where they threw down the buckets that they'd emptied out. So I got to, I was the go-between there. And then in that trip, our extra time was to Wadi Rum, where Lawrence of Arabia was filmed. There are several films that have been there. We stayed in a Bedouin tent that night. Then we went on to Petra, which is the lost city that they finally found again in 1814. But so those are my trips with Habitat, and I would looked up on my phone to see if they were still doing them. They had stopped for the 3 years of COVID,
Right.
But they're beginning to do them again. Right now, I think you have to be in a special group. I mean, you can have a corporation group or a group. They're not, I just signed up when I decided I wanted to go to a country.
As an individual?
As an individual, yeah.
And you took a grandchild with you, or a child with you?
No, I didn't
Adult
take,
child?
not on those trips, no. And somebody's always interested in how it paid for. You paid for your own trip. And so, it didn't cost Habitat any money to have us there. But
So did you develop any building skills other than concrete?
oh, I am very good at straightening nails. That's what I had to do in Papua New Guinea because we couldn't get any more nails. So if you would hammer it in and it went in crooked, it was my job to straighten those nails. And I'm pretty good at concrete. I can move those buckets.
Okay, I got my driveway could use a little.
Would you like me to come over and visit you?
Yes, right. You come and stay a long time. You could have a lot of fun on my driveway. And that's it. So, would you recommend somebody to get involved in Habitat?
I would. And we do have, right here in this building where we are, the old school in Mayville, is where our office is for the Chautauqua County.
So how does one get involved?
They can just go online and look for our number and call and see where we're working, and we'd be delighted to have any volunteers who would like to come and join us.
Do you have them come individually, or are there groups that come?
We have groups from Cummins that come. We have a whole different groups, but individually you can show up. And it's usually on Saturdays that we work, like 9 to 12, 8 to 12, 8 to 1, depending on what we're doing at the time. But we'd be delighted to have anybody come.
And does one need to have carpentry skills?
No.
Anything like that?
No.
You
My
just come.
first house at Chautauqua was in Celeron. And I went and they said, okay, there are 2 jobs available for today. You can either go up and help put the roof on. Well, I didn't think I'd be very good at that. But the other one was to put wallboard up. So that's what I did. And the other volunteers will show you how to do whatever you're assigned to do.
So in addition to contributing your time, one learns some skills
Right.
for other sorts
Yeah.
of things.
And I'll come fix your driveway.
That's right. That's right. Let's switch gears a little bit. And you have a unique perspective. And we joked about who's the first lady, and I say Board of Trustees runs it. The president is a hired hand. So the spouse of the chairman of the board is that person. And you've lived on the grounds. Remarkable perspective for the community. Been involved in the community, and still are involved in various boards. How have things changed in your experience here at Chautauqua?
Well, some of them are good, and some of them, in my opinion, are not so good.
Yeah.
I like having the 9-week season. When I first started coming here, we had an 8-week season, and,
Right.
and I do like having it a longer season. One thing that I wish hadn't changed was the morning lectures were a week long with the same speaker. Now, I understand the problems, because if you have a speaker that people don't particularly want to listen to, you have a whole week that's out the window. But that was at the time when more people came for a longer period of time. Now we have so many people that come, for a week or 2 weeks, and I can understand why we need to have more more speakers. But you get when you have somebody for a whole week, you get a much deeper lecture about whatever the subject is.
Right.
So that's one thing I don't like. I like that we have more diversity now than we did 50 years. I'm comparing 50 years
By
to
all
now.
means.
So I like the diversity that we're trying to do. I think that's good for everybody, no matter what color, race, religion, whatever you are. I think it's good to know people that are different from you and can. As someone said one time, humans are very similar. They might have different views of life, but they have the same emotions worldwide, and I found that too. That's what I think.
Why are people coming for shorter periods of time?
Well, I think that happened when women started getting, back in the 50s, or the 60s, a lot of women were teachers, and of course teachers had this usually had the summer off. But I think as women got more involved in other professions other than teaching, then they didn't get a whole summer off.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter-in-law is a lawyer. She doesn't get 3 months off.
Right.
So I think that's the difference, that families can't come for as long a time as they did. And the cost might be too.
Yeah,
It is
and so that is a change.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a shorter stay.
Right, yeah.
And you've sent how many generations to the club here at Chautauqua?
How many do I have?
Yeah.
5.
5. Goodness. So,
But my grandfather, who was in his 90s when he first came, thought it was jail.
really?
Because he had to show a ticket to come and go, so he called it jail. But the rest of him, I mean, he liked it fine, but he just called it jail.
And so with this long perspective, you see it's changed. Any other observations you'd make about the changes here?
Well, I don't know. I'd been thinking about that, and I really don't have, I mean, some are personal that it's just me that feels that way. But I think that what I've said is of the big changes that I have seen. And I'm glad Chautauqua is still similar to what it was when we first came here also.
Yeah.
There seem to be a few more cars on the grounds
Indeed.
than there used to be.
And hard to keep off.
Hard to keep off.
And
yeah.
people make a little niche and they want to.
Well, I saw one of the fire people yesterday, and he was in a scooter, and he had this long thing on the back of the scooter. And I said, "What's that for?" He said, he took it out, pulled it out. I don't know how big it was. And he said, "That's how I tell people that the fire truck can't get through. If their car is parked before I get my stick clear out."
Yeah.
And that's a big problem. The fire truck and the ambulances are a big problem. They're getting
It
through
sure
the streets.
is. It sure is.
Yeah, so.
The question I always like to ask, it's in some variation, and that is, you have this magnificent perspective. You've been involved very much of an insider along the way, and those trips to the Soviet Union are probably the biggest thing in our lifetime that'll happen.
Oh, I think so.
From Chautauqua. If a young Chautauqua family comes to you and they express an interest in buying a cottage and having a long-term commitment, what would your response be? And I would also say before you answer, you're financially smart, having done income tax for all these years. What would you tell them?
Well, I tell them I think it's a smart move. I mean, my family has really enjoyed all these years, my children and my grandchildren, and my parents and my grandfather. I think cost is a problem for a lot of people. And as I said, we bought the cheapest house in Chautauqua.
And it's a magnificent cottage, isn't it?
But I don't know that we could have afforded it at the prices they have now. So I would say if you can, I think it's a great idea. And it's a good education for everybody in the family.
Yeah.
You know.
And what should they do once they're here?
Everything they wish to do. I mean, they take that magazine or the daily in the morning and look at everything. That is one thing that we do have different. There are much more things to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's particularly a good idea, but I would say take that daily and look at that schedule and say, I'm going to go here, 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 here. I think people that are here a shorter time do a better job of that than people that are here a longer time.
How many programs do you normally do in a day?
Oh, 3 or 4, but
Okay.
I'm not always on the run like
And what's your favorite?
the 10:45 lecture and the symphony in the evening. Probably those are my 2. I'm not as fond of the Friday nights, but I think they're great. I mean, I think it's great for the people that like the more modern stuff, but
Right.
those are my favorite things.
That's terrific. We are out of time. What else do we need to cover? And I mean, you've done so many different things here.
I think we're covered most of my life
You
here.
bet. Well, this is terrific. So do come back.
Well, thank you.
Great.